Doctor, thanks for being with us and making time to talk a little bit about your visit to Guatemala. You met with the President Giammattei today, and let me read your tweet. Discuss important U.S.-Guatemala relationship with Dr. Giammattei, underscored imperative of ensuring peaceful transition to President-elect Bernardo Arévalo, and upholding democracy and rule of law in Guatemala. But what did actually the President say?
Well, first of all, the words that you just read, I think, really accurately summarize what I came to do and what we did, which was talk about a set of bilateral issues. He's still the President of Guatemala, and we have important cooperation on the economy, on migration, on counter-narcotics, on foreign policy. So I came and we engaged on that, as I have done with him before. But I also came to underscore the imperative, I think that's a good word, of a democratic transition. Guatemala had a free and fair election. The people of Guatemala spoke. They chose their next leader. That leader is set to take office in January, and it's really important to us to see that process go to its conclusion without undue and inappropriate interference by any actor. And so I did underscore that to the President, very consistent with what I and U.S. officials across the board, White House, State Department, here at the embassy, have been saying for many months now.
And in the previous years, Das Jacobstein said that the U.S. expected more from Giammattei. At this point, do you really believe what he says about democracy?
He has said very clearly that he is committed to a democratic transition as well. He recognizes the outcome of the election, as he should, because it was, I think, probably the most internationally observed election that Guatemala has seen. We were very satisfied that international observers concluded it was free and fair. President Giammattei has said he respects that outcome and that he will ensure the democratic transition, which is exactly what we need to hear, but we also need to see it because there are other actors in the system, and we've been very clear about that too. There are other actors in the system who seem to be determined to put obstacles in the way of that democratic transition. We haven't been shy about saying who they are and why we oppose that, and even taking measures. You know, we've sanctioned dozens of officials for corrupt and undemocratic action, and we think there should be consequences for corrupt and undemocratic action. So far, fortunately, the transition continues to be underway. We have every expectation that now President-elect Arévalo will become president in mid-January, but we're watching very carefully. It's one reason I'm here, to let the people of Guatemala and the administration in Guatemala know that we're watching very carefully at the highest levels of the White House, because it's really important. And it's not just important to us, it's important to Guatemala's future. There's a real chance here to show the depth of democracy in this country, but also to promote political stability, which is what is necessary for Guatemala to grow and create opportunities for its people. And that's a process that we want to support. We support it under the current administration. And if Guatemala can show that it can have a free and fair democratic transition and use the resulting stability to grow its economy and partner, that everybody wins from that. The contrary is also true. If there's interference in the democratic process, that would create instability and real problems for the people of Guatemala, for stability in Guatemala, for investment in Guatemala. I actually, just met in the last hour with businesses who do business here and are the results of foreign direct investment. Those investors need to see stability and rule of law, and that's all the more reason why we so vigorously oppose efforts to interfere with democracy and rule of law.
Does President Giammattei take a position regarding the actions of Ministerio Público?
Does he take a position?
Regarding the actions that Ministerio Público has been taken against democracy?
Well, he can speak for himself. I think we've been pretty clear that some of the actions of the Ministerio Público look like they are politically motivated and designed to interfere in the process. And that's why we have taken the steps we've taken to make sure that there are consequences for that. So all we can do is speak for ourselves and make clear that there have been and will continue to be consequences for actions that interfere, whether it's Ministerio Público or other institutions of the state.
How was your meeting with President-elect Arévalo? Do you think he's going into a transition period and getting ready to be sworn in on January the 14th?
I do. I think he fully expects to be sworn in on January 14th, as he should be. It's what we expect as well. We talked honestly about some of the obstacles in a way. I mean, it's clear, as we just discussed, that there have been those who are seeking to interfere in that process. And it's important for us, it was important for me to understand what those obstacles are so that we can help overcome them. And let me just be clear, we're not, it's not for us to choose leaders or parties in Guatemala or anywhere else. And we didn't do that, and we're not doing that now. That was for the Guatemalan people to do. And they did so resoundingly and clearly. This was not some super close election where it could be disputed or challenged. It was the people spoke. And that's why we are working with the president-elect, as we would have with any president-elect who is duly elected, to ensure a smooth transition, the anchoring in democracy, and the circumstances in which Guatemala can grow and prosper and be an important partner of ours. So we had a really good meeting. We also talked about his governance plans, because we're also focused on the transition and possible obstacles to the transition. We can't lose sight of the fact that he's going to be president of the country in less than 2 months. And any incoming administration faces challenges with the economy, foreign policy. I mentioned migration, narcotics. So there's a big agenda, but it's a common agenda. And we worked with President Giammattei on a number of issues of mutual importance, and we expect to work with President Arevalo and his administration on all of those same issues.
We have talked about some actors that are taking some actions against democracy. We spoke about the role of Ministerio Público, but you also talk about the Guatemalan people. What's your message to the Guatemalan community in order to prevent a full derail of the rule of law and business opportunities in our country?
I think the Guatemalan people can see clearly for themselves that there are two different paths ahead of them. One path is one in which the democratic transition is interfered with inappropriately. That alienates the international community, the United States, investors in Guatemala. It creates political instability, raises questions about corruption and the rule of law. And that's not a very happy future for the people of Guatemala. In fact, it seems to be one of the reasons that they voted so clearly and resoundingly the way they did, because that's the other path, the path in which the will of the people is respected, a new administration comes in, and starts to work on the things that the Guatemalan people care about, which seem to be, if you read the election results, fighting corruption. They know that corruption is a scourge in the country and it interferes with the growth that they need, and that's what we support as well. And so I think, that's my message to the Guatemalan people, is we support what they seem to have asked for in voting the way they did, very clearly for democracy, stability, and anti-corruption. And that's a future, there aren't a lot of bright spots in the world on the democracy front right now. Some scholars talk about a democracy deficit. There were, we used to have the wave of democracy where the number of democracies was rising, and now in many ways and in many regions it's falling. And so it's like all the more important when you come across a country that has made a clear choice and the people spoke. We have to make that work. And so the stakes for us and for all of us and the people of Guatemala go beyond Guatemala. It's important, obviously, here, but the world is watching. And I think the world needs to see that it's possible for people to use the tools of democracy, choose their leaders, and have a positive transition from which they benefit.
Just before we talk about the PCA, the Charge d'Affaires Patrick Ventrell, in a interview with Plaza Pública, said that actions against democracy could impact commercial relationships between the U.S. and Guatemala. Mm-hmm. What should we expect if the authorities are not sworn in on January the 14th?
So I think there are two components of that. Again, one, we've been clear that we will take measures against those individuals and institutions who act to thwart the democratic process. We see corruption, we'll sanction it, and we have various means and tools for doing so, and we've done it very clearly, and when we see interference with the democratic process. So that's one set of things that we've been clear about, we've done already, and were there to be inappropriate interference in the democratic process, you can be sure that there would be consequences for that. But then there are consequences as well that we don't control, but would happen as well. And I just mentioned meeting with investors, because you said we're going to talk about PCA. As you know, we've been very active, and Vice President Harris has been very active in leading efforts to promote foreign direct investment in Guatemala and other countries of the region, that would happen all by itself, where companies looking for stability, and in this globalized world, there's a lot of places you can produce your stuff. You don't have to do it in Guatemala. And any hint of interference, absence of rule of law, absence of stability, chaos, violence, companies just say, you know what, I'm happy to go somewhere else. So that wouldn't be a US measure, but it would be something that would happen. And that's why, I think for the sake of the people of Guatemala, it's essential that there be this transition.
And why is PCA so important for the administration?
PCA has done a great job. Since the Vice President launched her call to action, which was based on the notion that if you want to help the people of Northern Central America and give them hope and opportunity, you need to create jobs, and more than jobs, but stability, gender equity, and PCA has this Inner Hands program to promote leadership and work opportunities for women. PCA sponsored a rule of law and good governance pledge, which you also need to see. And all that's part of a package that serves the people of Guatemala and the United States. This is in the context of the root causes of migration strategy. The Vice President has said many times that people don't naturally want to leave their homes. They don't want to just get up. They have their families, their churches, their communities, their schools, and their language and their culture, and they don't naturally want to just make a dangerous journey to another country. They do that when there's violence, instability, and lack of opportunity. So PCA has been our partner. It's a public-private partnership in promoting these goals. And again, we've talked a lot about more than $4 billion in foreign direct investment, which is hugely important. But that doesn't come alone. PCA also has a lot of projects to connect people, to do upskilling and training. And again, we saw some of that here in the meetings we had today. Programs on gender equity, opportunities for women, rule of law, and good governance. All of that comes as part of a package. And when the US government can work together with the private sector, we can have good results. And I think we've had really good results for the people of Guatemala by working with the PCA.
Thank you, Doctor. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.